For centuries, our economy has been guided by a few core beliefs. One is the idea of creative destruction, that for something new to be born, the old must be destroyed. Another is the paradox of progress, the quiet assumption that for society to move forward, some people must inevitably be left behind. It's brutal logic, and it's logic that deserves to be challenged. What if there's another way? A different economic model? One that doesn't see tradition as something to be destroyed, but as a foundation to be built upon. A model that refuses to accept that leaving people behind is just the cost of doing business. It's an economy built not on destruction, but on care. You might call it artisan economics. To explore what that looks like in practice, I wanted to talk with someone who has dedicated her life to proving this countermodel can work. My guest today is Stacey Edgar, and she's spent her entire career building and studying these alternative economies. She's been a social worker, founded a multi-million-dollar fair trade social enterprise, and is now the executive director at International Folk Art Market, the world's largest folk art market. She's seen firsthand that a more humane, more connected, and more sustainable way of doing business isn't just a theory for the future. It's already happening all over the world and has been for a long time. In our conversation, we explore what artisan economics can teach us about building a more equitable and connected future. I'm Eric Ressler, and this is Designing Tomorrow. And now, my conversation with Stacey Edgar. So, your career has been anything but conventional. You grew up in small town Illinois, but then you're leading the world's largest folk art market. You've been in social work, you've been in a you started a social enterprise, you've also been a nonprofit executive director. So you've really played around with all the different ways you can show up in the social impact space. I'm curious, how did that trajectory happen for you, and how has that shaped your experience in this sector?
Yeah, it's really funny because I don't think that anyone would ever plan a career path that I've said. And I taught at the University of Colorado at the Leeds School of Business for 5 years. And I used to tell all my students, there is no career ladder. There is a career jungle gym. So just, go from playground equipment to playground equipment, following your curiosity. That's sort of what happened. So I was a social worker working with women and children. So I knew of programs where we were trying to place moms who needed to complete that welfare to work requirement. Meantime, my father-in-law was a politician in Illinois. He was a 2-time governor. And when he left office, he and my mother-in-law were both asked to be on 2 separate boards of the UN World Food Program. And she was visiting places where the food program was giving food assistance, but always meeting with women who were selling their handcrafts and would bring things back for me and my sister-in-law. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I know women who would love this stuff, A, because it's fabulous work, and B, really want to support the work of these entrepreneurs. So that's kind of how I started Global Girlfriend. And from there, 17 years running a social enterprise is a real springboard of a MBA. And so I ended up teaching after that and have loved IFAM for many years. So that's how I ended up here.
Great. What was kind of the spark that made you take the plunge and, turn a $2,000 tax refund into a multi-million-dollar social enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, it was really two stories combined. I had been doing social work for about 10 years at the time and had worked with so many women in the child welfare system who were young mothers and being brought to the attention of the system for neglect. But oftentimes when you got into it, they had no childcare, they had no job opportunities, job training. And so it wasn't so much that there were all these neglectful mothers, that it was that there were not the right safety nets and opportunities for people. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law is meeting with these entrepreneurs with the same thing. Again, super tenacious. I ended up getting my PhD, and one of the stats that sticks out for me is across Africa, 76% of women still work in the informal sector, meaning doing all sorts of work, but with no social safety net whatsoever. So yeah, it was really, women I had worked with in the US, as well as those my mother-in-law was meeting, specifically some women at a group called the Gemini Trust, which was for moms of twins. Ethiopia has an outpaced number of twins, and at the time it was a famine, and mothers were losing typically one baby because they couldn't feed them both.
When you were growing Global Girlfriend, what were some of those learnings in growing the organization that you wish you maybe would have known if you were to start a new social enterprise today, or for other people who are considering starting a social enterprise?
I mean, I think one of the biggest joys was how open and receptive everyone was to the idea. We got in with really big partners like Whole Foods and West Elm and Target.com. We even did some work for Neiman Marcus, all because individuals and companies wanted to be a part of supporting the artisans that we were working with, right? I think just ask is my first piece of advice, because once you tell people what you're doing, it's not a sale you're trying to make, right? You're inviting someone to be part of a bigger movement. And so that was really fun. It was really fun to see how many people wanted to join in that. On the flip side, lots of hard things. Social workers don't know much about importing. And my very first large shipment, so I had done all sorts of, DHL boxes and UPS shipments, and even gotten packages in the mail that were wrapped in burlap, covered with stamps. But my first true shipment came in and it wasn't tagged correctly, and U.S. Customs said they were going to burn it. They did not. They gave us 3 days to relabel everything, but lots and lots of basic business learnings. But now I feel like there's so many more resources, whether you've gone to business school or not, that you can tap into when starting that kind of business.
After Global Girlfriend, you shifted into academia. How did your experiences running a successful social enterprise influence that teaching career? And then on the flip side, how has that teaching career changed your perspectives and your learnings as you've moved on in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first course I taught was called BASE, and it was really, really fun to teach a practicum course where you're asking students to look at their internal rate of return and their weighted cost of capital and all the things that maybe social entrepreneurs don't dive into first, but really should, to understand how profit actually is the fuel for the purpose that you're trying to make happen. So that was fun. I went from there to teaching that business solutions course, where we did projects with companies around the world, a lot of artisans, but also agriculture projects, tech projects. And it's so fun to see students take their basic business knowledge that they've learned and then apply it to a real world situation with a company in a different context. The light bulbs that go on for them are really amazing, and same for the entrepreneurs they were working with. So that has been great. I also taught an introduction to business course, which is called World of Business, which is really for leads, an introduction to the political economy. And it was interesting to me. It was such a great course. We had game days and debates and position papers that the students loved. But as we're looking at the core thinkers on both sides of an issue, right? Adam Smith versus Karl Marx. And there were so few women, people of color, indigenous voices and perspectives that was a real eye-opener for me. If we want people to see the world as a whole, we have to look at the whole world. And so that's been a real driver for me. I'm working on a book right now and really looking at some of the things that we discount in the global economy, like care.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But before we do, I want to ask a little bit about the transition into your current role as the executive director at the International Folk Art Market. And this is a different position in the sense of you're at the helm of a nonprofit that you took over after a 20-year legacy. And I'm curious about, still some through lines around, art and artisans and women's empowerment, but a very potentially different business model compared to a social enterprise, a very different experience than being a social worker. I'm curious to hear just like what was surprising, if anything, about being in that kind of angle and position and just the cultural differences between running a nonprofit versus running a social enterprise.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as real collaborative and bringing together all these groups as part of my brand. But honestly, when you run a brand with a small team, you just are very flexible and you do what you want. When you run a nonprofit with a board, and I don't know if you took a look at our website, but we have a very large board, almost 50 people, and very, very involved, as well as a volunteer core of 1,500 that help us put on this event. And so becoming a better listener and trying to take into account all of our stakeholders. I was teaching at business school the importance of stakeholder management, right, versus shareholder. But at IFAM, it's artisan stakeholders, community stakeholders, our volunteers, our board, our donors, our shoppers. So lots and lots to manage. That it should not have been surprising to me, but definitely was.
Yeah. On that note, you've talked a lot about the importance of resilience in running organizations, in purpose driven enterprises, but also in nonprofit organizations. And I'm kind of curious how you think about that, especially in this moment where resilience is being heavily tested in the sector at large because of either funding cuts or extra scrutiny for some of this type of work, when the word women is on banned lists in America, at least right now, among other things. Has there been a test on your resilience as a leader or your organization, or just what are you seeing from your vantage point, and how do you think about resilience in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's certainly been a stressful first half of the year. Of running an international market has always got its challenge in that we bring in artists from this year, 57 countries were invited, meaning they need to get their visas, ship their goods in. And as you know, this spring we went through country ban, potential tariffs or tariffs put in place and then somewhat dialed back. It's super challenging. The biggest thing that I feel like it strengthened the resolve of my staff, my board, my volunteer core. In fact, our volunteer numbers were up. But the artists, some of them were afraid to come to the US. Some of them were worried about just, even though they've come many times before, for some of them coming through customs when they were hearing stories about people being detained. And so we had a pretty tumultuous spring. Luckily, we are not reliant on federal funding, which is funny because we were in the middle of writing an NEA grant for the first time when they changed. And we were truly 3 days from submission when they said you can no longer say women and you can no longer, you know, promote diversity. And we are about global diversity. So in 2024, we had 167 artists, 165 that ended up coming. 165 artist groups or artist businesses from 50 countries. And they supported almost 12,000 workers. Were making the products coming to the international folk art market. And of those, 83% of them were women. This sector is largely driven by women. And so we weren't willing to submit the NEA grant. A, they probably wouldn't have funded us and didn't end up funding people. But B, it's really against our values. And so with all these challenges, what I also saw was just an amazing, amazing resolve. We were back up to pre-pandemic numbers with over 20,000 visitors. We hit record sales at $3.88 million of folk art sales in 3 days and 3 hours. We have 4 days of the event, but the first night is 3 hours. And what that said to me is not that people are so hungry to consume. The economy's not great. There's inflation. There was a 10% tariff on all these incoming goods, which was passed on to consumers by the artists where they needed to. But people showed up because they cared about person-to-person diplomacy. They care about showing the world that despite what you're hearing about how America thinks, it's not right. So I was excited by the resilience of both the artists and all the people who support their work.
Hey friends, real quick before we continue today's episode. I'm Eric Ressler, founder and creative director at Cosmic. Cosmic is a creative agency purpose-built for nonprofits and mission-driven organizations. For the last 15 years, we've helped leaders like you nail your impact story and sharpen your strategy. But we're not here to just leave you with a fancy slide deck and a pat on the back. We roll up our sleeves and help you bring our ideas to life through campaigns, creative, and digital experiences. Our work together helps you earn trust, connect deeply with your supporters, and grow your fundraising and your impact. If you value the thinking we share here and want it applied to your biggest challenges, let's talk at designbycosmic.com. All right, back to today's conversation. You're working on a new book right now called Artisan Economics.
Yeah.
A lot of the themes of the book seem to be around how to create a business that centers purpose, dignity, community on par with sustainability and resilience and profit. I'm curious to hear what thoughts are going through your mind as you're writing that book. And I'm also curious to hear how you think more globally, more culturally around the purpose movement. My sense is that I don't want to say purpose has peaked, but purpose became a little bit of a hype train. There was a lot of kind of greenwashing and cause washing, a lot of brands trying to tap into conscious consumerism, some authentically, some less authentically.
Yep.
From your point of view, what is the kind of current state of purpose-focused or mission-focused businesses?
You know what? I think when purpose and mission becomes your marketing, it's going past its core, which is doing the right thing for the right reason. And so interestingly, Artisan Economics isn't so much a how to, build your business or make a brand, although I hope that people who are building a business will take some lessons away. It's more what each of us can do, the choices that we can make, that I see reflected in how the artisan economy works, opposite of the mainstream economy. For example, coming from teaching economics and teaching global political economy, economist Joseph Schumpeter talked about creative destruction and how, the next thing will take out that. So, maybe AI is going to take out podcasts altogether. It's just going to tell people what they want to think. Who knows? But in the artisan economy, creativity builds on itself. It is not about destroying what's happened in the past. It's about building forward and retaining tradition and heritage and what makes us who we are in the places that we're from. Same with his other theory, the paradox of progress, right? That when we progress, some people will be left behind. Artisans don't leave people behind. I've got a great story. Mercedes and Nati, two women, mother and daughter, who run a cooperative in Peru called Hilos y Colores. They employ 800 women across the Andes in the Ayacucho region. And when one of their communities, a small one that they worked with, not a big profit center for them, not a big export, the kids in that community were becoming anemic and health was really bad because it was a really bad growing season. Instead of waiting for somebody to fix it or letting them be, the paradox of progress and decline, they started carrying vegetables up the mountain in the lightning storms every week until this community was well and until they could grow and source their own food again. And that, to me, is that culture of care that we need across the economy, right? Especially as jobs are changing.
I'm hearing that term care and culture of care make its way into a lot of movement building, whether it's from climate and environmental organizations, artisanal organizations. What does it mean to you? I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, even just out of my own curiosity, because I think it's one of these terms that's being used by different organizations and different people to mean different things. So I'm curious how you interpret it and how you use it.
Yeah, I guess again, coming from, and I'm not afraid to say this, a feminist perspective, and really the work that I did in my PhD to study what I had done in my 17 years of social enterprise. I'm like, wait, what was that? Um, One thing that we know for sure in the economy and around the world is there is no country that treats women equally to this day, and that beyond that, anyone who is transgender or non-binary, I mean, not even close. So because we are not even close to that, one of the main things that we see is that throughout history, until the 1970s, we did not recognize women's labor in the global economy. It's crazy. The Women in Development movement was started by a woman, Esther Bosra, who was studying populations in Africa and India and was like, women are doing most of the work. Does anybody realize this? And still today, like I said, the stat as of at least 3 years ago when I was writing about this was 76% of women across Africa work informally. That means they work their butts off and do not get credited for that work, let alone the care work that men and women do for their families and the economy. So we see countries like Norway or Denmark that we really look to. And I know they have very high taxes, but they also do have that culture of care. I was in Bhutan last year, and to be in a place where the government employs a whole group whose whole job is to make sure that the population is well, and they have gross national happiness as their mark of development. And they keep 60% of their country has to remain forested. If you build a house, you have to plant the number of trees it took to build your house. That is a culture of care to me, right? That means I care about the environment. I care about the ecosystem, and I care about the people who make things work, whether that's paid work or not. Sorry, long answer.
No, it's great. Thank you for going into that. I'm curious about when you're going through hard times and as you've gone through hard times as a leader. Leadership can be lonely. It's kind of a trite saying, but I think it's true. Even when you're doing leadership in and with community, where do you turn for inspiration or for your own well-being and health? Or what inspires you? What keeps you going when the going gets tough?
I mean, it gets very tough, and you don't always do the right thing, right? You do what you think is the best thing, and sometimes there are unintended consequences, and you have to shift. That happened to me with merging with a larger company, right? And so there are times that it is really hard. I think for me, I rely on other leaders in the space. I have a really great network, especially in the artisan space, and I really rely on their expertise and just their friendship. I also have a great group of friends and a great family that I rely on. And then reading and yoga. I mean, I just think you have to treat your body well and nourish your mind as well. I don't always do that as well as I should, but I try.
I think we're all there. As we wrap up, I'm just kind of curious about what are you most excited about right now in the near term and the medium term? Obviously, you've got a book coming out. You're continuing to do good work in the artisan space, but what's kind of lighting you up and what's giving you that inspiration to keep going and getting you excited about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited working on this book. However, it probably won't come out till 2027. So there is a long cycle for all of that. I'm just really excited with where IFAM is going. I think, while we are our 21-year-old organization, we've been really grassroots, and I think we have a really peak moment to say to the world that this is a really important space, and that creativity and I don't know, acknowledging and embracing global creativity at a time when people are worried that we're going to, fade into an AI existence, and authenticity, I think, is exciting. So for all of those of us who are working across cultures and really working in authentic ways, I think the more authentically we can represent those is what's exciting to me right now.
As we were getting to know each other before we started recording, we were talking about how we just spun up a new Substack in part for this project and just more broadly for my work at Cosmic. And we're talking about social media and how it's changing and how it's feeling like it's becoming more performative at times or more shallow. How are you thinking about how we show up digitally and how we can use these digital tools more skillfully, more intentionally to really help them fulfill the original promise of them, which was authentic human connection, which seems to be kind of counter to where a lot of these platforms seem to be going today?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we all get onto social platforms because we want to be social. And it has given us this worldwide reach to connect. We're connected through LinkedIn, and I think that's so exciting. But I also feel like, our biggest personal poverty at the moment is disconnection, right? Disconnection from the things that we buy and how they're made, disconnection from one another in kind of a rat race of work. And so, how to figure out ways to connect more authentically is something that I think about a lot. And it's something that the artisans that I work with are looking for too, in this sector for many years. And I am guilty of this. I tell a short story about, what it means to buy from this person. What I love about the international folk art market is you get to meet that person. Like, it's my favorite thing about my job is I'm not having to always be the intermediary. It's the person-to-person connection. And it's something I think, platforms like a Substack is meant to make you more personally connected. And yet, sometimes it does get very performative. And so I think, we all need to be cognizant and also reach out more, right? Like, I find when I reach out to people and say, oh gosh, I want to connect with you because you're just super interesting, I often end up on Zoom calls or on having, coffee with somebody that I would not have met otherwise.
Stacey, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. Before we wrap up, where can people follow you? What would you like to plug?
Sure. I would definitely ask you to, visit folkartmarket.org to learn about our organization and follow us on both Instagram, Facebook, wherever you like. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn. Certainly you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram, but on Instagram, you'll mostly see my kids are getting married. That's the other thing I'm excited about. I had one in June, another in August.
Okay.
So if you want to see good wedding pictures, follow me on Insta. But if you want to hear what I'm doing professionally, I do spend a lot of time on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe, or even leave us a comment. It really helps. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do for your cause and for being part of the movement to move humanity and the planet forward.